Started recording.
So jumping right in to what makes a project eligible, there are 5 main components. The first one being that project being eligible for federal aid in order to become eligible for our RFF Regional Flex Funding Program. So each funding source has different eligibility requirements, and then different projects are eligible for different reasons. But the second component requirement for our projects is that they are all locally managed. What this means that a sponsor will be responsible for all reporting as well as updating the MPO so that we can report to our board twice a year, as is the requirement. The third requirement in order to be eligible for our FF program is that it has to be NTP compliant. Also, other locally adopted plans would also suffice as long as they are approved by a governing board or body.
That last point,
Yeah,
said or another locally approved plan. So if we have a local project that is in a locally approved plan, it is still eligible.
Yes.
the fourth requirement is the phase. Only projects that are within a certain phase are eligible to be submitted. One change that we have done this year at the bottom two, utilities and CEI, construction engineering and inspection. Those are 2 that have been added with this year's call. And then there's the minimum match for all requests. We require the sponsor to also put up 20%, and also they must identify the source of these local funds. As far as submitting applications, we will have the forms on Microsoft Forms in order to fill out. That is where they can answer the questions based on whether you're submitting a new project or funding for an existing project. And then for the shape files and other files, such as the detailed budget sheet, those will go in a OneDrive link.
Filmon,
Yeah,
could you go back 1 slide, please? It was just fast there. Applicants must provide 20%. Actually, aren't they providing, they're funding 100% and getting reimbursed 80?
that is correct.
I just want to
Yes.
make that clear.
Thank you for that point of clarification.
Thank you. Below are some of the details of the funding spreadsheet. We were asked to provide the details of the budget spreadsheet that we are asking to be submitted. And so the things that are being asked on there are just the funding being requested, the source of the fundings, and the split, as well as the years that each be used.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
So I know Filmon a couple slides back mentioned like CEI and construction are eligible phases. And those have been eligible, or CEI and utilities, sorry, are eligible phases. And those have been eligible in the past. What we're looking for this year is to show those in the budget spreadsheet if you're requesting construction funding. Our partners at DOT had also requested if there is even the possibility that there might be utility work on that project, to include a small amount of money in utility phase when you're estimating costs for that. And we can go over that more in your pre-submittal meetings of what that might be, but it's much harder to add in the utility phase after the fact. And so even just putting a small amount of money in that phase is something that we would like to see this year.
Thank you. And then lastly, being asked for is the contingency amount. One thing to note with this, a change that resulted in this year is the minimum contingency for each project has been increased. We are now asked for a minimum of 30% for projects that are within construction.
Filmon,
Yeah,
sorry, Daryl again, DOT.
Hey, Daryl.
Just what one thing, so I that the second bullet point, the amount and source of the local match, I would recommend having used those kind of words before in an application that we put out. I changed that in my case, and you may want to consider that for your case, so that it says the amount and source of the 100%. Or, you know, something stating that 100% is local funds to begin with. Because people will, it has an implication of, oh, okay, there's 80 federal, you know, no, you have to fund the whole thing first. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It was just my experience, so Daryl out.
Thank you. Next is going over just some of the boundaries for which members may apply. Here are the active project caps that are based on the local match for each jurisdiction. And that determines the number of submittals that member may submit. And then another change that we have done this year is increasing total project cost. It was previously 100,000 and it has been increased to 250,000.
We had a question in the chat from Tina about, is there an option to share files without using a zip file format? I think we can figure that out if we.
Yeah, perfect, but if not, then it's also okay. Next, we're going into our actual funding availability. So right now we are planning to program 3 years out. And so for this year, this upcoming call, this is the total amount that we have for this call, 12,500,000. So this is a total for our sources. And like we said, from RFF, we will be deciding which projects go towards which sources. And then getting to the scoring, our projects are scored on a point-based system. And then the points are awarded based on several different criteria for equity means, such as connectivity, access to transit, population employment density, and then the project phase. We do try to prioritize projects that are in the construction and right away, just to get those moving. And then some more criteria that we base upon local priority for members to choose a project to add points to. And then environmental justice, equity, safety, and emission VMT reduction are all criteria that our projects are scored on. Just want to wrap that up real quick so we can get to our guest presenters. Is there any questions on our general DCHC process before our NCDOT partners take it over with the federal aid project delivery section of this training? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on.
Tina has a hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
Hey, thanks. Sorry to have my screen up. I'm kind of multitasking a little bit. I just want to circle back to the CEI matter. Since traditionally CEI is a percentage of construction costs, and so until you have that exact number, you kind of usually you bid the project and you advertise your CEI at about the same time, and you finalize the CEI once you know the final cost. Where I'm going with this is, can you still include CEI as part of construction, or do you have to separate that out?
It can be included as long as we know what percentage that you're allocating to CEI from your construction.
Okay, so
within that
so you could
detailed
just
budget.
so you could just list construction and say something like to include CEI or something like that.
Yes, that.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Raymond's giving me a look though. So.
It depends on project scope. A long duration project, the CEI math works out. Short duration, the CEI is going to be a higher percentage of the construction because CEI is a fixed rate per month, whether it's a 6-month job or a
Okay.
2-year project. It's a fixed rate per month. So low value, short duration projects are going to have a really high CEI ratio to the project cost, where long-term projects, it evens out to more around the 10 to 15% range. But they will bump up to like 25 to 40% on short duration projects. So just don't go with a straight 15%.
A straight blanket 15%.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's not the case. You need to know the project duration and estimate some dollars per month for CEI, which is like 25 to 40,000 a month. per inspector.
Okay, did you hear all that, Tina?
I heard most of it, and thank
Okay.
you. That's helpful to hear that extra kind of factor to count in. I think the reason why I brought it up is that we have found scenarios, particularly with our in-house finance department, where we've broken projects down into small pots of money, and it's created a lot of complications if one amount ends up being slightly higher than what's budgeted, and it tends to work better to keep things in larger pots. So, for example, construction versus breaking down all the different parts of construction, it just makes it easier to move money around as needed. But thank you for those comments. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and certainly, once we get into the pre-applicant meeting phase, we can take a closer look at those specific projects you're applying for and what the CEI should be needed for that. Thanks, Tina. Okay, and we have a comment from Jason Schranz that from a STIP programming phase, CEI costs will be programmed under the construction phase. So it's okay to not have them separated.
Okay.
Where's the
All right.
rest of it? What's going on?
I'm sorry, what was that? Could you repeat that? Or
It's not showing.
it's not meant for us?
Yeah, it's not showing in the teams. Perfect, that's better. This is the window. And can you switch it's in browser mode? Okay, there we go.
And off and on again. Arrow keys right now.
You can see this. Good morning.
Switch it back.
Sorry, one last technical. We're still getting used to our new room. There we go.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, so still use this to
Yes.
advance. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thought there'd be a much larger crowd here, so.
Mostly online. You have 23 people online.
Okay. Good morning to all of you, virtual world. I'm Marta Matthews. I'm the manager of the Local Programs Management Office at DOT. I'm here with Raymond Hayes. We're going to sort of tag team this presentation. I just changed this yesterday, so we're doing it a little bit on the fly. This is really a broad overview of using federal funds that are administered through DOT. We just want to point out some things for y'all to be aware of as you're putting together your applications, sort of the big issues that we see, and hopefully things that you can use to, improve your application and make a better project going forward. So kind of do two parts. Again, first part, major requirements of the Federal Highway Administration. These are things that we cannot get around. We don't want to get around them. We call those your big rocks. These are things that apply to all sources of federal funding. So regardless of what kind of funding you're getting, most of these requirements apply to those federal funds. And I will say that these requirements have increased over the last several years with each new Transportation Act. It started with, I think, ICE-T, we had Safety Lou, we had TAP 21, or MAP 21, all these acronyms, and we're now up to the bipartisan infrastructure law. Every time one of those transportation acts gets enacted, we get new requirements that we have to apply to federally funded projects. So it just has gotten more and more involved over the last several years. The second part will be sort of planning your proposal, breaking down these sort of big things that you have to do. This is what Raymond will talk on. So how to factor in these federal requirements to your application and your project proposal, and things to be aware of that increase your schedule and increase your cost on the project. All right, so the federal requirements. the first big thing with Federal Highway Administration is that DOT and Federal Highways have a stewardship and oversight agreement that we are bound by. It lays out all the responsibilities of DOT to provide oversight for the federal funding that we use, and not only the funds that DOT uses directly on our own projects, but also the subrecipient projects, the funds that pass through us. It lists all the responsibilities that cannot be delegated to DOT. So there are a lot of things that Federal Highways has said to DOT, you know, you can do these things, you have authority to approve these items, but there are several things that Federal Highways retains, and they have approval for. And then the agreement also lists detailed requirements for the oversight of local projects. And a lot of these requirements are found under Title 23 of the Code of Federal Regulations. If you want to look at the agreement, the stewardship and oversight agreement, it is available online. So Federal Highways does authorize funding by phases. This is one of the things that they have to do. DOT cannot do this step. The three major phases: preliminary engineering, right-of-way / utility relocation, and construction. Now, it's Colleen, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. As you pointed out, we are trying to keep right-of-way and utilities as separate items in the step. We also have different cost estimates for those. We have different WBS elements for those, but from Federal Highways perspective, they really treat it as one phase. We cannot request authorization of funds until certain deliverables are met. I've included the reference to the CFR if anybody wants to look it up. And then any cost incurred prior to funding authorization are not eligible for reimbursement. So again, there's the reference to this is definitely a big rock in the whole process. We don't have the ability to go back and get costs that were incurred prior to authorization eligible for reimbursement.
And you can't fund backwards.
Right, meaning you can't, yes, you can't, authorize right away and then come back and say, oh, we wish we'd gotten PE eligible. Can we get that authorized? So yeah, it doesn't work that way. So. So consultant procurement, can be a lengthy and complicated process, but Federal Highways does have a process for procurement and administration of consulting contracts that use federal funds. Selections must be qualification based. The consultant rates must be audited by NCDOT. And then the contract between the town and the consultant must include federal provisions that are specifically related to non-federal entities, so local governments. You need to have these contract provisions in your contract with engineering firms that you're going to use that will be reimbursed with federal aid funds. Again, the CFR reference is there. This is actually pretty readable. I encourage you all just to pull it up and look through it. It is actually, it makes a lot of sense.
DOT has a pre-qualified contractor site. It would be highly suggested you utilize that site for any procurement because those people have already been through the ramp.
Yeah, we do require that the firms be pre-qualified by DOT, and whatever the work codes are that you're, soliciting for. We do have a whole process for this. Don't worry. We give you lots of details about how this works, but it can be lengthy, and we just want to make sure y'all are meeting all the requirements so that we can reimburse you with the federal funds. NEPA, I think probably everyone knows this, all the projects must meet the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act. You need to have qualified personnel to perform these surveys on endangered species. DOT has to review your environmental documents and make sure you've done everything correctly. You use our forms. It's a very, very structured review. And the documents have to be less than a year old when we go to request funding authorization. So you need a current CE document when you authorize right-of-way funds or construction funds. So you may have gotten your CE approved, you authorized right away, and then it took more than a year to get to construction, you'll need to come back and do a consultation on that environmental document to bring it up to date, and then we can authorize the construction funds. And again, I've included the Title 23 reference for
And-
CE
and
documents.
When it comes to the NEPA documents, if your project doesn't fall into one of the type 1, 2, or 3 categories for a CE document, if it falls into environmental assessment or environmental impact, it is highly suggested you do not select that project if you're going to have environmental impacts or an environmental assessment. That will tremendously lengthen your project. So
Yes.
I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 type 3s in 6 years. And those were for new location roadway projects, which obviously they easily hit, but most everything's a type 1, 2. If you started getting above that, you're asking for a lot of time and a lengthy schedule and very expensive environmental impact fee to go along with your project.
Yeah, we have a project up in the mountains that's on the National Park Service land, and they would not accept a CE through federal highways. They required an environmental assessment, and that has hugely increased the consultant costs and also the time they're nowhere near getting to construction. So. All right away. All right of way acquisition must meet we call it the Uniform Act, the long name for it is down here at the bottom. Is there a question?
No, I think someone's just not
Okay.
muted.
Okay.
I'm gonna mute everyone.
Sure. So the highlights of the Uniform Act, the property owners are entitled to an appraisal. You must offer just compensation, and that offer must be reviewed by DOT prior to working with the property owner. And most importantly, right-of-way requirements apply whether or not you use federal funds to reimburse right-of-way. If you're using federal funds on any phase of the project, if you're just using it for construction, you still need to show that you acquired your right-of-way in accordance with the Uniform Act. Again, here are the 23 CFR references for you. All right, construction contracts must include federal aid contract provisions, Davis-Bacon and minimum wage requirements, disadvantaged business enterprise goals, Americans with Disabilities Act, Buy America. This has been expanded to include construction materials, not just iron and steel. Title VI, there's a whole list of federal contract provisions that will need to be included. Again, these are things we can't get around, and these are some of the things that have increased, I would say. There's been in the Transportation Acts, there used to be some flexibility if your project was not on a federal aid highway. For example, it was a greenway or if it was a sidewalk on a local road, you may have had some exemptions from these requirements. But Congress has said basically all the funding sources that you're getting except for CMAQ has said that you must treat those projects as though they were on a federal aid highway, even if they're not. And that's based on the source of funding. So again, we're getting more and more requirements on these construction contracts.
Marta,
Yes.
this is Daryl, DOT, as you know. I just wanted to add, just stress to our audience here that this is for construction and for engineering or even planning before you get to a project. Things like Davis-Bacon or Buy America don't apply. It's a different set of provisions, which you mentioned. I just wanted to stress that provisions for construction are not necessarily, but there may be some overlap, the same for preliminary engineering.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, if we go back to the consultant side and you look at that CFR reference for administration of engineering contracts, there's a whole section in there about the contract provisions that would need to go into your contracts for engineering. And then construction contract administration. This is the whole process of bringing on your contractor and then, providing construction oversight, which is your CEI. But, mainly Advertisement for construction contracts must be for 3 weeks. You may not negotiate with the low bidder. And DOT must concur in the award of contract to the responsible low bidder. So again, these are things we cannot get around. I know the state law allows you a lesser time for advertisement, and that you can negotiate with a low bidder, but you cannot do that with federal funds. We will use the DOT construction manual, and our standard specifications will apply to the construction contract. Yes, sir.
This might be a dumb question, is that a minimum advertising time or exactly 3 weeks?
It's minimum.
Minimum.
Yeah. I think DOT does it for 4 weeks on our own project.
And it's per advertising. So if you advertise once and don't meet the minimum submitters, your second advertisement must be for 21 days again. 21 consecutive calendar days, sorry.
All right, so just keep in mind that you will be working with 3 levels of government, so federal, state, and local. Everyone has their own processes and systems in place, and we can't really get around a lot of that. So just build in that time, on your end for your own local process, and to give DOT enough time to do our process. We do work with you. I mean, we are here to help. I'm here, my employee Sheila Gibbs, she works with the eastern half of the state, or really, excuse me, get my numbers straight. She's the central part of the state. So she works with divisions 5 and 7, which covers this region. And she couldn't be here today. But both Raymond and Stephen Robinson and 7, we're here to help. We want to make this a successful project. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And we're here to, make sure you get reimbursed for your funding. I know sometimes it's not easy to say no when you don't like to hear it, but we just want to protect you at the end and make sure you get reimbursed.
Marta,
Yes.
I think it's a good spot to chime in and just remind our audience, and especially the DCHC, TCC members applying for projects, that as a result of all the bureaucracy, I think the take-home message is, whether a project is $200,000, $2 million, or $20 million, it's the same requirements. So there's a more economies of scale by going bigger, basically. Would you agree?
Absolutely true. And I'm glad to see that DCHC is increasing their minimum project cost. I think that will be a big help. Thank you. I think there's all right, so I'm going to turn it over to Raymond. He's going to talk a little bit more detail about some of the issues that he's seen, and hopefully will help you with your project.
Right. My name is Raymond Hayes. I work as the local projects program manager for Division 5. I'm a consultant with Benish. I've worked with Division 5, it'll be 6 years in February. Yeah, February, it'll be 6 years. So I've done quite a number of projects. Division 5 is pretty busy. I deal with DCHC and CAMPO, and Cartar RPO are the 3 regional entities I work with. So CAMPO is a pretty active program. They put out quite a few projects every year. DCHC does too. I only deal with Durham County out of DCHC. Stephen gets the benefit of dealing with everyone else, which is fine with me, and I will gladly give him Durham any day he's ready for it. So, right here, yeah. So the whole point of the program is to deliver projects. You don't need to design it and throw it on the shelf. You don't need to take 5 years to get it done. You're getting a project. You say, I want this money in FY24. You're expected to build it and spend that money in FY24. That's what you said you would do. So there's going to be a lot of direct contact with your DOT representative in the division you work in. Division 5 would be myself. Division 7 would be Stephen Robinson. I believe you said you're in Division 8 now, sort of ish. So that is someone I am not familiar with. So I do not know who to tell you they are. So make sure your projects, when you work on your projects, you need to make sure that you have a realistic milestone and a realistic schedule that will set your milestones. Like Marta said, the projects are broken up into 3 phases: PE, right of way, and construction, based on how the funding is organized. So there are specific milestones for moving from one phase to the next. You need to make sure you understand what those milestones are and the requirements of those milestones so that you can move forward to the next project. Schedules, be realistic. You are not going to get funding in October and get construction funding authorization 365 days later. It will not happen. Do not have your council tell you to make it happen. It will not happen. Don't even try. It will not work. There is one municipality I work with that has figured out one type of project that they can do it in. It has no right of way, and it's basically a sidewalk back to curb project that is not very lengthy in physical length. They can make it happen, but it is tight, and they are very, very fluid in this program. So just be realistic with your schedules. The truth will come out eventually. You can say, well, yeah, we'll do it in 365 days. Eventually, the truth will prove you wrong. I can promise you it happens constantly. The other thing to plan on is at the end of construction, the project is not finished. You have just finished building it. There's a lot of work to do at the end of a project. You have to do the final estimate. You have to do final payments. You have to do final reimbursement. The department will send you a billing worksheet. You got to pay that bill. And then the DOT can start the shutdown process. You'll get notification on closeout eventually from Federal Highways with your voucher. It's not a very short process, so be prepared. When you prepare a project, you need to anticipate that project budget being carried a year at least after construction. So be prepared for that. Did I skip one? There we go. So issues that we run into. A poorly defined scope will wreck a project really quickly. And the problem you have to realize is by the time you get to myself or Stephen, you've already been awarded funding. You've already told the MPO that, yes, we can do this and we can do it this way. And once it gets to us, you're stuck building it because that's what you promised. That's what you sold to DCHC and that's what they bought. You got to think about it this way. You're selling a project to them and they're buying it. So you got to deliver on what you promised to do. And if your scope is bad, it's a bad project. It is. Just you're going to have to figure it out. You either need to figure out how to get through it, and it could cost you a lot more money, or it may be worth saying, we're canceling the project. We'll do better next time. And canceling a project always needs to be a viable option. You need to keep that in mind. Constructability. Once again, this goes back to scope. The issue with constructability is you will build the project. Once you start construction, you will finish it, no matter how financially painful it is. We ran out of money is not an excuse. You cannot, too bad. You better find more money because you will be finishing the job. You have a right to cancel the project up until the day you start construction. But once you start construction, you will finish it. There is no question you will finish it. Get your right of way right. Your right of way is where you build the job. If you messed up on the right of way, then you just brought your project to a stop. And make sure you understand the utilities. Utilities will shut a project down in a second. It is very, very recommended that you do a very detailed SUE survey in your design, because you will find the utilities whether you planned on it or not. So just be prepared. Other issues, once again, scope will transition into an estimate. So make sure you're with a well-defined scope and understanding of the project will help you come up with a better estimate for the job. That is the amount of money you're telling DCHC that you will build this project with. And that's how much they're going to give you. If you miss utilities, or if you miss a major constructability component, it's going to cost you more money. DCHC may not be able to give you more money, but once again, you will finish the project at your expense on any overages over funding. So do an accurate funding request and make sure you consider all the components. There's nothing wrong with having money left over at the end of the job and giving it back. That's perfect. You should end up with money left over. Because if you run out of budget, it's 100% on the municipality unless DCHC can give you supplemental funding. So just keep that in mind. Scope creep is not an option. Your project is this size, it will do this work. That is exactly what you will do. If you scope a project to be on this side of the road and you realize, oh, we need to go across the street and do something over there. No, you can't. Unless you pay for it at your expense because you have just moved outside the project scope. And your project was scored based on the size it is, which relates to an estimate, which relates to the value of money that, or the quantity of money that you were given to by the MPO. If you start scope creeping, that could affect your score and could have scored your project lower than the next project on the list that would have received that funding. So scope creep is not going to happen. Same with scope reduction. You said you're going to build this size. That is what you promised to build, and that is what you will build. There are situations where if you need to modify the footprint of the job, it's not just as go across the street and do it. You've got to consider that your CE document may not cover that area. Your environmental permit may not cover that area. DCHC hasn't given you permission to go over there and utilize their funding over there. Now, if you want to go over there and spend your own money and do it, have at it. That's all on you. So scope creep is a very real issue that will be kept in check. One other thing during construction is quantities. Make sure you have a good firm that knows how to estimate projects. Luckily, you working in the Triangle area and Triad area, y'all have access to very, very experienced firms who do a lot of DOT projects, so they're well experienced in plan assembly, bid documents, and estimating. Make sure you estimate for right-of-way costs. And make sure you have a good understanding of what those are. Appraisals are going to be $2,500 per parcel. So if you got 100 parcels, you're talking a lot of money. That's just to estimate. That's not counting buying the property. Most of the municipalities deal with real estate a lot with your utilities and other things, parks and things that y'all may have. So y'all may have a good understanding of what actual true property costs are, but just plan accordingly. Once again, you will pay for it whether you estimate it or not. You're going to pay for it. And utility relocation, if you are going to do a major relocation, you better be talking to the utility company the day after you are awarded your funding, because that is going to be a very expensive process. And realistically, you should be talking to them before you get your funding, because it is expensive. I think Duke Energy quoted $1 million just to put utilities underground at an intersection, just the intersection, not 1,000 feet, just the intersection was a 7-figure estimate. So I know everybody wants everything underground, but it is a very, very expensive venture to do that. And then also make sure you plan for all the utilities below your power company. They can be very challenging to get them scheduled too. And then obviously make sure you've selected a project that's got a good small impact, if any, to the environment. Like I said, if you're getting anywhere near an environmental assessment, you do not need to consider that project at all, because one, the environmental fees are going to destroy the project budget, and the time is going to kill it too. So you just need to stay away from those things. When it comes to estimates, do not use the DOT bid averages. Those are bid averages for roadway projects. You are not doing that. You are not anywhere near the scope and scale of those projects. The values on there are not even accurate to what you need to be using. You need to use prices that are relative to the scope and scale of the projects in your area. If you don't have any, talk to your design firm if you have one. They should have enough experience somewhere to get you some reasonably good pricing. You can look at the bid averages, but like I said, those unit prices are going to be very small. They're going to be low based on economy of scale. So don't hang your hat on those. Be prepared to adjust your engineer's estimate. As DCHC said, they're going to let you budget projects 3 years out. If you come up with $1 million project today, the cost of that project, you need to assume 3 to 5% escalation of construction costs for every calendar year compounded as you proceed away from your estimate date. So you could estimate a project today at $1 million. 2 years from now, it could be 1.1 million cost. Now, obviously, that doesn't take into account the crazy inflation that we're seeing, but on average, escalation's around 3 to 5% per calendar year. So just be prepared for that if you're going to long-term budget projects. Be prepared for re-advertising. You may advertise a project and the contractor's like, we can't buy this. I mean, Apex did a project. The contractors are like, we can't get to buy material for superstructures that meet the wood density requirements. They don't exist. So we had to get an exemption to do something like that. So be prepared that you may get comments from your bidders that say, we can't physically find this material or it doesn't exist right now. That's not been the case here lately. Things have gotten better, so be prepared. The other thing you cannot do is you cannot negotiate. The price is the price. That's what they said. That's the best they can do. There is no talking about it or dealing with them. And cost escalation, just be prepared that a project that you had, I mean, I had this conversation yesterday. I said, the closest project I got to something that you're advertising is from March. And I'm like, those unit prices are useless today. So, and it's only been 6 months. So be prepared that previous projects that you did a year or two ago, they're great, but their prices may not even be close to relevant today. Right-of-way issues, make sure you follow the Uniform Act. That is required, even if you aren't getting right-of-way funding, because one of the key milestones for requesting construction funding is a utility railroad cert, which goes into the utility goes into the right-of-way realm, and then a right-of-way certification is 2 of the milestone documents you have to have completed to get construction funding authorization eligible. So you have to follow the Uniform Act. You have to follow all the steps. DOT appraisal reviews, negotiations, all that good stuff. One thing about if you're dealing with a property owner that decides to donate land, you're still required to give them an appraisal and show them the value of the land they are giving away for free or $1. You still have to show them that because they may change their mind. The appraised price is the price you have to deal with. You can't just say, oh, we can get it for half that. That is not an option. You cannot do that. The appraisal is the value where you will start offering them money. Condemnation is a big issue. You need to be prepared to condemn property. I have had projects dealing 2 years trying to negotiate. They're still negotiating. Some municipalities, like, here's your offer. They say no, it goes to condemnation the next day. If you don't do that, be prepared for your project to go way behind schedule because you're at the mercy of someone else dictating to you how long they want to decide to how much money you're going to give them. So condemnation needs to be a viable option. And I tell that to municipalities and they don't like it, but I'm like, your project's going to take 2 years to clear if you don't. So just be prepared for that. Other issues is chasing down multiple property owners for estates and things like that. Those are issues. Title searches, and that's why you pay a real estate firm to do the deed searches, to do the appraisals, to get everything prepared for you. Utilities, so they're a nightmare. Yeah, it's about typical nowadays. You need to be talking to your power company immediately. You need to be talking and figuring out who's beneath them quickly. Getting them prepared for the project. These are STIP projects. They are added to DOT STIP. So the utility companies are required to treat them like they would treat every other DOT project. Their encroachments apply, their easements, their everything still applies. So if they're within the right of way and you need them to move, then they are required to move at their expense. Now that's kind of debatable sometimes. They may say, that's fine, we'll be there, we'll get to it in 3 years. And so that's kind of how they deal with some of that stuff. Undergrounds are great, but underground is slow. So just be prepared. If you want to go from overhead to underground, it's going to take time. Be prepared for that. Once again, you need to be talking to these utility owners immediately in preparation of your budgeting request to the town or from the MPO, sorry. Like I said, one key document you're going to be required to give is utility railroad certification. That document has 2 sections, utility railroad, as clearly stated. It states that there is no impacts. Impacts are addressed prior to construction, or impacts will be addressed during construction. You must attest to that one of those 3 statements for each of the 2 sections. If you have a project with railroad, you better be talking to them quickly, because they don't care how long it takes you or when you have to spend your money. So if at all possible, avoid the railroad. Always avoid the railroad. If you have to deal with them, you better start immediately, because you're going to be expected to pay the fee. You could be expected to pay a fee up front for them to look at your drawings. They will charge you dearly for it. They will adjust their rates annually, and they will send you a new bill that you get to pay. They will require a construction agreement or access agreement, and you get to pay everything just for them to breathe air. Practically, you're paying for, and you will pay dearly for it, I can promise you. So be prepared if you're dealing with any railroad construction. Now, when I say construction, I mean like you're trying to put a pedestrian sidewalk across the railroad gate crossing, or if you plan on building a bridge over their facility, it is going to be a process. Trust me, it's going to be a process. And like it says there at the bottom, utilities can get expensive, so be prepared for that. Other administrative costs you need to consider is you need to make sure that you have funding authorized before you perform any work you want reimbursed. Now, some municipalities may say, we want to go ahead and do our appraisals and get all that out of the way, and we don't care about, we'll pay for that out of our own pocket, and then we want to get our funding and then go to right-of-way acquisition. So they will choose to pay for appraisals out of their own pocket, because it may only be like a half dozen or so properties, no big deal in holding up the whole process for that. And so there's things that can be done to help the project move along a little more efficiently. If you want to get full payment for everything, then you can't do anything until you get funding. So just keep that in mind. In general, PE costs, you can estimate around 10 to 15%-ish. Once again, it depends on the scope and scale of your projects. Right-of-way costs are going to be a little more challenging. Is that okay? All right.
Don't know.
Okay.
It's okay with me right now.
All right. Like I said, right-of-ways are going to be a little more challenging. Appraisals, you might as well estimate $2,500 per parcel, plus the fee of whatever you're buying, either construction easement, temporary easement, permanent utility easement, slope easement, or straight up right-of-way. That's going to be whatever the market rate's running in your area at that point in time. Make sure you estimate your CEI. On general, DOT's general rule of thumb is CEI can't exceed 15% of your construction costs. That only really works on long duration projects. Exemptions are granted for short duration projects because that CEI fee is a little more skewed higher than the 10 to 15%. On average, you should estimate per month of construction, one inspector is going to run you probably $30,000 just to have that body sitting there breathing on your project 40 hours a week. Two inspectors are going to run you $60,000 a month. Now that includes their time, their truck, all the admin staff that goes along with them being there doing their job. Because you're buying a resident engineer's office if you buy CEI services. You're buying staff that is equivalent to a resident engineer's office sitting on your project. And it is highly suggested you do it. It is not the best idea to try and perform CEI services with your own staff, unless they are someone who is ex-DOT with 20 plus years of field construction experience. If you try to do it with your own staff, you will fail. I can promise you, you will fail. Your documentation will fall short and M&T will blister you for non-participation. It will happen. They have no choice but to do it. And so you can do it, but it is not advised. And I hate to break your heart on that one. And the other problem, a lot of CEI municipal inspection staff is they're not financially prepared for a person to sit on a job 40 hours a week. You need an inspector on the job 40 hours a week. This is not come by every other day for an hour to see how things are going. That is not going to happen. If you plan on that, you might as well plan on losing all your federal funding because basically everything's going to get done wrong. I've seen it done. I can promise you it does not work. The one issue with this whole process is you can't request funding until the beginning of the federal fiscal year. So if you have a project, let's say DCHC awards you funding, miraculously they go through their process and you get funding for Monday. And you're like, we're ready to start. Well, you can't authorize those funds until October 1st of the following calendar year because that's when FY25 starts. Well, in Division 5, I'm not going to look at that project because I don't have anything to charge my time to. As we don't work for free. Stephen might, I don't. So until funding gets authorized and I have a WBS number to charge my time to, I'm not going to touch your project. And everybody knows that from the start. Everybody in Campo knows that. A mechanism that the department has is what's called a review and oversight agreement. And that is an agreement between the municipality and the division directly, where it says basically, we will pay the division a set fee, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, depending on how much the project, scope of the project. They will put that in a WBS number and I can charge my time to it. And then basically it's a declining balance. If you have a project, and that comes in, that's beneficial if you have a project that you're only asking for construction funding for, because the assumption is that you're already working on design phase prior to October 1st of that fiscal year. And so you can either route that project through the district office and they will deal with it accordingly as if it was an encroachment agreement. If not, you would need to do a review and oversight so that the LAP project staff can look at it ahead of time, or you can just wait till October 1st and get your funding set up then, and then we can start looking at it. I would not suggest having DOT look at your 100% plans as your first design submittal. It is guaranteed you will be redoing those plans and you will be paying your design firm to redo a bunch of work they've already done. So please do not submit 100% plans to the department for the first review because you will pay for it to get done again. I can promise you. I've seen it happen every time. So don't anticipate getting it through. And the other thing you need to be prepared for is, like I said, is DOT costs. When your project gets awarded funding, the WBS number will be set up and DOT can charge to that for their time and effort. They are a review staff, just like you are paying for your design firm to design it. DOT will review it to ensure compliance. Their time will be charged to that project and you will be charged for that time. 80% of, depending on the reimbursement ratio, your federal funds can be utilized to cover DOT expenses. And that should be in your budget. And then you will pay your remaining local match as required for all other expenses on the job. The DOT is an entity, just like the CEI, the contractor, the design firm, the right-of-way team you utilize. They're another entity on your project that is eligible for reimbursement. When it comes to resources, the best resource is your local staff, your local division personnel. I deal with this every day, all day long. So does Stephen. His workload regarding lab, it may be a little less than mine, but he knows the process intimately. I know it intimately. Marta's group knows it intimately. Call us first. I tell people, if you ever begin a conversation with I think or I believe, you need to call somebody quickly because you are getting ready to make a mistake. It's going to cost you dearly. There are websites. You can go to the FHWA website and read that thing to death, and it will probably make you never want to bid on a project ever. Marta's got a website that she's worked on over the years. It is still being fine-tuned. There's a lot of information on it. And there's a lot of things you can utilize. Biped Group developed a scope and guidance for local governments. That link will take you, is this internet? On the internet? Yeah. See if this works without crashing.
Might have to.
Nope, it worked. Okay. So this will take you to the Biped site. If you scroll down slightly, you'll see Biped scope guidance. That is that document. That'll take you to that document. It's a PDF. It explains the LAP program in an insane level of detail and covers everything. So be prepared for it. But at the back of it, there's an estimate form you can utilize to help estimate projects. But it is an exceptional document. It was geared towards biped projects, but the process is the same for local roadway projects or biped projects. So it's still the same process. Let's see if I can get this back. There we go. You seeing that again?
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, Marta's site has a lot of information on it. There's a lot more that needs to be added to it. There's a project, local project. What is it called? Yeah, so there's her website, and there's a group now meeting to help develop the lap work group. Sorry, I drew a blank. There's a lap work group right now that's working to provide better information, more thorough information, bring together all the bits and pieces of how the program works and trying to get it in one good central location. The best thing to do is call your local division, local project manager, and ask them. I talk to municipalities all the time. I deal with 26 municipalities in Campo alone. So it's busy. We'll call Stephen. Stephen's always available with all the information.
And one thing I would like to kind of highlight as well, just as Raymond mentioned, while a lot of municipalities do elect to use a firm for the project development stage, it's also very critical that the municipalities have some dedicated staff to manage those consulting firms, because one thing that we encounter is there's some folks that have multiple duties and they kind of toss that project management of that firm in there, and that would drastically slow down the process. And it's very important that you have dedicated staff to manage the firms, because while the firm does the bulk of the work, There's still critical things that the municipality has to do, such as all the EBS work,
Right.
and things of that nature. So that's one thing that, I would definitely like to emphasize. That is highlighted in the stewardship and oversight agreement. That I think there, in my discussions with the FHWA recently, not just in our area, but in other areas as well, they're going to add some emphasis onto that. Because that is a stipulation, for receiving federal dollars, and that will also, can either inhibit or help with the project development and delivery process. So just want to make sure there's adequate staff on the municipality.
Just realize the LAP program may look intimidating and look like, oh my God, there's all this stuff to do. It's a very simple program. It's a very simple process. It is as streamlined as it can be. You just need to know what to do. And you're not going to be an experienced person utilizing the program. I am, Stephen is, Marta is. That's why you need to call us and ask us about what to do, what your next steps are. That's why we're here. Don't feel bad. Oh, I gotta call and ask him another question. That's fine. I just talked to a guy here on the way here who has done lab projects, and they are very experienced in it. And he still calls and asks me questions. Because you have to realize the whole point of the program is to get you reimbursed. And federal highways will not accept not getting you reimbursed. And that is what we have to do. No matter how we figure it out within the specifications, is to get you reimbursed.
Hello. Hey.
So, but there are things you can do that we cannot recover you from. So you can mess up to the point that we cannot fix it, and federal highways cannot fix it, and you will lose your money. But we can get out of most problems in some manner. So just realize that. All right.
I just want to, as we finish up, just highlight a couple of our resources. So once you do get a project and you're, starting your agreement, getting into project delivery, look at our website. We have form and template letters on the right-hand side, so you don't need to reinvent anything. Then we have a section on the enterprise business portal, which is how you're going to manage your project, how you're going to request the agreement, how you're going to submit documents for review. It's how you're going to request reimbursements. So there's some links here. There's a PowerPoint that goes into more detail on project delivery steps. That's what I was going to do today. And I thought, no, I'll let y'all look at that at your own time, your own leisure. But then the project management tool is how you'll manage the project with DOT. So folks at the town, if you don't have access, you need to get access to it. And everything will be run through EBS. Right. So any questions?
One other thing about your projects. One of the requirements is that you have to follow DOT specs and standards. That is the approved project management method that Federal Highways has accepted. They have 50 of them, one for every state. So you have to follow the DOT process. You have to follow the DOT specs. Saying that, you will have to develop a DOT contract or project manual. You cannot use your town manual. You cannot use the AIA or EJCD specifications if you have paid for those for your municipality. You cannot. They conflict with DOT specs terribly. They're terrible. Do not use them. If your contracting office says that's what we do, you're like, no, that's not what this job's going to do. You need to make sure they are aware of that. You will do it with a DOT style contract that is linked in Marta's website. There's a link at the bottom, takes you to the contract standards page that lays out how to develop a DOT contract. Your engineering firm should be well knowledged in that. They do it for DOT all day, every day. Do not use town specs. You can use them for, if you have a specific style driveway you like, you can utilize that as a special provision, but no AIA or EJCD specs at all. They will just cause you a nightmare for your project. So do not do it. And the other thing is Federal Highways requires a DBE goal, disadvantaged business enterprise. It does not require an MB or WBE goal. If you have that in your municipality, you need to let it go. Do not include it. You can put it in as a recommendation, but it cannot be used to determine lowest responsive bidder. It is only a recommendation at that point. So please understand that. One municipality I work with has it, and they realize quickly to drop it. It just makes bidding a nightmare. So I'm just talking about some unique municipality issues I've run across that I don't know if y'all deal with those or not, but the other thing is there will always be a DBE goal. It can be 0, but there will always be a goal per federal guidelines. We'll get zeros on specialty projects like striping jobs or some technology projects. We'll get into the 0 range, but most everything else is going to have a goal of some sort that will be determined by the division staff when they have their DBE goal setting meeting, Stephen. I'm not sure what it's called.
We also run some of them in through Benny's office. We use them to set DBEs. That's what our division has been doing. They historically our division runs it. But yes, we will provide the goals forward.
But you got to have a set of plans, you got to have an estimate, and you got to have a bid document put together so that they know what you're looking at. So be prepared. But it's a slick process. It works great. I mean, we municipalities I work with complete probably, MPO gives me about a 12 to 15 new projects a year. And we get about 12 to 15 projects built a year and cleared. So it can be done. It's not hard. Just do the steps right the first time and it's not that big a deal.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm online. This is Daryl at DOT. And I'm just going to ask this as if I were a member of the TC here in Durham. You were mentioning, you had one slide towards the beginning of your presentation regarding the scope. And you mentioned, and that slide hit a number of bullets on the scope, but you had mentioned something interesting that you had seen over and over issues or errors or something with the scope. I was wondering if you could, without calling out a specific project, but in generalities, give some examples of some of these errors that you've seen so that, you know, if our audience here can hear what some of those errors are, then they won't make that.
So scope issues you need to consider. Suppose you're going to do a roadside trail and you're like, oh, we're going to put it on this side of the road. I would suggest when you scope your project, scope the other side of the road also, in case you want to change sides of the road. Because if you choose one side of the road, you are stuck to that side of the road. If you're going to do sidewalk projects and you come up to an intersection, I would say go 100 feet down all the legs of the intersection in case you want to do other wheelchair ramps at that intersection and you need to do a little bit of sidewalk work. If you go up to an intersection and you stop there, you literally cannot cross the street with your project. Your scope has creeped, your cost has gone up. It doesn't cost you anything to plan to be bigger because you're going to design it to the size you have. We see projects all the time that have a giant footprint on a corridor identified, and then we look at the project, and the project, once it's sold to the MPO, is significantly smaller. But if they need to make significant revisions about, well, this water feature that we were planning to go over is going to be too expensive, we need to cross the street and go this way because we don't want to build a bridge. Extra big footprint doesn't cost you anything. But making a significant change like that will cost you dearly when it comes to the MPO, because they can tell you no. They are not always going to tell you yes. You need to be prepared that you might hear no because they have no money. So once again, I would suggest when you're putting your projects together, like Colleen mentioned, is to meet with staff that deal with these projects daily, myself or Stephen. I can't volunteer him to show up and meet with you, but He will probably make every effort to be there. I will, because whatever you come up with and you get to construction, I gotta help clean it up, no matter how bad it gets at the end, so that you get reimbursed. So I'm doing this out of my selfishness, because I don't want a disaster to clean up at the end, and it's gonna just keep costing you money to fix it. So everybody benefits if you set the footprint of the project right, the scope, the construction expectations and things like that. It will save you a tremendous amount of headache and a humongous financial burden. Because you will, once again, you will pay for this project, no matter how painful it takes it to finish it, you will pay for it. So be prepared. I have this discussion with the entities I deal with. There is no question. They know if they mess up, they own it. So.
All right, any other questions from the room or online?
Not seeing anything yet online.
All right,
Eric
well,
looks like he's formulating a question. Want to start? Okay.
I'll ask it now, and you can decide if we can talk about it later or not. Is there like a required contingency amount for a project to go to the construction phase? Like, I know it's like 30% when you apply for the call for projects, but like, you know, that budget gets eaten up as you progress through like the stages of the project. Is there like a required like contingency amount to go to the construction phase? Like,
If you're going to estimate construction budget, I'm sorry, if you're going to estimate a construction project budget, not just construction budget, but project budget. I'm just going over construction right now. You have a construction cost, let's call it $1 million. You're going to have a CEI cost, we'll assume 15%, that's 150,000. You're told in your municipal agreement to anticipate 10% DOT charges. Now, that may fluctuate a little bit depending on if the division runs the project for you during construction, or if y'all hire CEI. CEI is obviously covered by the previous budget mentioned. So you have DOT charges you need to cover. There is a construction contingency you need to put in your job. No project has finished on time that I have dealt with. I literally could probably count out of the several hundred I've worked on, probably less than a handful have finished on time. When your project overruns in time, your CEI is supposed to be there. So you need to pay them a supplemental to continue to be on your job. That additional CEI time can be covered by the contingencies that you have built into your job, because I can promise you I have less than this many projects, less than 5 that have overrun contract value in 6 years. It might have been 3 that have overrun contract value. But if you have a 10% construction contingency, then you can utilize that funding. Because you got to remember, your budget is just developing a pot of money for you to utilize for all relative and appropriate expenses. It's not assigned to this or that. This is your pot of money. Spend it till you run out. And so those are kind of things you need to anticipate. Now, when they tell you your construction cost plus 30% is that needs to be your budget, then that covers those extra items I just mentioned. But you still need to do the math and check it. It is not a certainty. You still need to do the math and do your due diligence to verify that that CEI is really going to cost us 25%, because, you know, it's a $500,000 6-month project, and the CEI is going to cost us whatever 6 months times 25,000. That's $150,000 on a $500,000 project. Is definitely not 15%. That's 30%. So just understand you still need to do the check and make sure that your schedules and your times line up with your costs.
Okay. If you're at like 30%, you eat a little bit out of that. By the time you get to construction, you can still proceed. Like it's not gonna like be like the end all be all.
No, it won't. But once again, a discussion I have once projects go to bid opening is I will have a meeting with them immediately and say, okay, this is the amount of money you need to be prepared for to finish this project. And I look at construction costs because we have bids, CEI costs because we have that fee already established, DOT fees that I can look up and estimate, project forward. Construction contingency, and then I'll look at that, compare that to the amount of funding they've received from the MPO and say, okay, this is the amount of budget you are short. Either you pay for it yourself or you go back to the MPO and beg for more money. But there's no certainty you will get more money.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
This is partially for y'all, partially for MBO staff. But from a small agency perspective, all I've heard today is we don't want this money, don't do it. If we can't manage the process. What is your experience working with Campo with some of the smaller agencies that may be represented there? And MPO staff, what tools do we have to help smaller agencies be able to manage? Because as it stands right now, I can't see us submitting any projects because we're not gonna be able to live up to it.
You have division staff. I only have Gary, Raleigh, Apex, Morrisville.
You know what I'm saying?
Those are the big groups we have. Everybody else is very inexperienced in the program. But I deal with, Nightdale, Wendell, Garner. I mean, Garner's got one job. They don't know anything about the program. They know to call me if they have a question, and I walk them through it. You've done this, you need to do this next. And I help move them through it. Rollsville, they picked up one project. They're doing one construction project that covers 4 different construction contracts between a street improvement, a new location, wheelchair ramp project, and a developer widening added to the job. That is their first project they've ever gotten, and it is a monster. And they have moved smoothly through the process because they admitted we don't know what we're doing, and they have asked for help. If you say you own it and you know it, then go for it. But I would suggest you ask for help. Yes, sir.
And Matt, again, and I've mentioned this to you, project management is allowable expenses under
Yes.
funding rules. Include that in, hire a consultant with a track record of helping a local community work through the system.
None of my municipalities manage their projects. They have been told, hire a competent design firm. They do that. Hire a competent CEI firm. They do that. They know because they're more comfortable now in understanding eligible reimbursement components, and they understand that. The thing they have to be prepared for at the beginning is put those in your budget request at the beginning. I have one municipality that will manage their own project internally, and it is a very, very small scope project. And that guy told me, he said, as soon as we move 1 ounce of unclassified earthwork, I'm out of this project. It is way beyond my scope. But he will do a sidewalk job like nobody's business because that's within his limit. But as soon as it moves dirt, you're moving dirt, he's like, I'm hiring a CEI right out the bat. I don't care. You're not going to be doing the job. You need to hire a competent firm to do it for you. That's what you need to do. And that's what you're paying them for. And that's what you should expect from them. Because that's what I tell municipalities when they're not getting what they're paying for.
That is correct. We've only got one municipality that'll manage the project, and if it's anything beyond sidewalk, I'm talking about like if utilities have to be moved, they don't mess with it. So it is just very simplistic stuff that they manage. So it is not uncommon or unreasonable to perform a lot of that work.
Once again, you need to determine within your municipality how much can we afford to put to this project. And when we do that, we need to include a design firm, a right-of-way agency to do our right-of-way. Do not assume your internal right-of-way department will do it. That has never worked out because guess what? They're busy. Or the right-of-way department quit and now there's nobody. Put a budget in there for a firm to do it. You will pay for a contractor, obviously. You should anticipate a CEI firm to manage the project at a resident engineer level. They will run the contract and project administration from the start of the job through the final estimate completion. You just got to pay the bill. That's all you got to do.
We need to move on for your other
Yes.
presenters.
Yes.
So-
Both very much, very informative.
So again, thank you so much for those two. Next, we have Mark Eatman to present on our CMAQ and CRP funds.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Online
great.
and in the room?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Mark Eatman, and I work for the Transportation Planning Division, and I am the CMAQ and CRP coordinator. And today I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the CMAQ and CRP programs and discuss some things that I think might be relevant to DCHC in terms of your direct allocation as well as statewide funding. And so really quickly, what is CMAQ and CRP? A lot of y'all know what this is, but they are federal grant programs that fund transportation projects that reduce harmful emissions. CMAQ, which stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, began in 1992 with Ice-T, and its main goal is to reduce certain criteria pollutants listed here, such as carbon monoxide or nitrous oxides, etc. So every year we get approximately $50 million from FHWA, and 27 million of that is set aside to MPOs and RPOs. That's roughly 55% of the program. The remaining 45% goes to statewide use, and that accounts for approximately $22 million a year. The CRP program, or the Carbon Reduction Program, began in 2022 with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And the main goal of that is to reduce CO2. So it's a little bit different than CMAQ in that it's focused on one pollutant. So with CRP, we get roughly $31 million a year, and 12 million of that is set aside for MPOs. Really quickly, I just wanted to touch on some typical projects that we see with both CMAQ and CRP. On the left-hand side of your screen, we have very commonly applied for projects such as sidewalks, greenways, multi-use paths, whatever terminology you want to use there. Different intersection junction improvements, such as roundabouts or adding turn lanes. We also see a lot of transit projects, and lately we have been seeing more requests for EV chargers and EV infrastructure, EV meaning electric vehicle. I do want to note here that EV vehicles and EV chargers are eligible for both programs. I will say it's a little bit easier getting an EV charger than an EV vehicle at this time due to Buy America requirements. FHWA is hopefully going to be providing some guidance and information on the vehicle procurement piece. Whereas EV chargers with the whole NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, there's a little bit more clear guidance around EV chargers. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about those sorts of projects. On the right-hand side of the screen are just some other types of projects that are federally recognized, but we don't see as much of these as we do the ones on the left, with probably the exception of being travel domain management and freight and intermodal connections, those types of projects. So this is not an exhaustive list. I did want to put that out there. So if you have any questions about a specific project that might be eligible, feel free to contact me and we'll see if we can sort that out. So how does CMAQ and CRP impact DCHC? This was, touched on earlier at the beginning of the meeting, but CMAQ, DCHC receives approximately 2.3 million in direct allocation annually. And for CRP, you get approximately $780,000 in direct allocation annually as well. And here's a picture of the the CMAQ eligible counties. So with CMAQ, it's only in these counties and townships. As you can see on the screen, there's a portion of Chatham County, but not all of Chatham County that's eligible for CMAQ. With CRP, on the other hand, it's statewide, and it's broken into 5 different funding categories, 2 of them being rural, two of them being MPO, and 1 statewide. And the funding amounts I have up here, the reason I say approximately is because funding changes from fiscal year to fiscal year depending on what we're getting from the feds for both programs. And then it also changes based off the population changes within each MPO and how that impacts, in this case, DCHC. So I wanted to talk a little bit about direct allocation versus statewide funding. I want to emphasize that MPOs should fully utilize their DA funds, their direct allocation funds, each fiscal year. Statewide money for CMAQ and CRP is generally set aside for like multiple county projects, projects that are much larger in scope, that impact statewide, or they're also for education and outreach type projects that can reach a lot of people based off the type of the program. Here's some examples below of what I'm talking about. A perfect example of the larger multiple county projects are projects that we do with the NC Rail Division. This one project, the Carolinian and Piedmont Operating Assistance project, that's one we've had going on for several years, where we provide CMAQ funds for operating assistance. An example of the education outreach side of things is the NC Air Awareness Campaign, and that's through the Department of Environmental Quality, specifically the Division of Air Quality. And we award them, I think it's roughly about $500,000 or $400,000 each year to administer that program. Yeah, there are a couple other examples there of types of projects that we typically use statewide money for. With statewide money for CMAQ and CRP, you'll often hear it called CRP Anywhere funds, but it's the same kind of concept, statewide, anywhere across the state. They can be used on top of your DA funds, but it's really on a case-by-case basis and under certain situations. Some of those I have listed here where you might have, say, a small amount of CMAQ money that you need on top of your DA allotment. So say going back here where you have roughly 2.3 million in CMAQ funding for a fiscal year, and you're trying to get to 2.4 or 2.5 based off the types of projects that you're selecting, we can work with you to kind of close that funding gap there. Another instance is when an MPO is working on part of a project that has a greater statewide effort. An example of this is actually the Carolinian and Piedmont project with NC Rail Division. We recently just awarded a project to that MPO, and we're using statewide funds for that because it's part of that particular rail project. But what they're trying to do it's in Salisbury. What they're trying to do is update the Amtrak station, the platform area, to accommodate more passengers, which, therefore it has a larger impact, not on only on the rail project and statewide, but also has a local effect as well. The other thing here is, although we, would very much like projects to be within the original estimate and time frame and everything, like Marta and whatnot were discussing before, we do occasionally do the occasional project supplemental due to inflation and outdated cost estimates and things like that. But as I mentioned, you can use statewide money on top of your DA funds. It's and this is done on a case-by-case basis, but we do want to try and stick as much as we can to utilizing your DA funds only as much as possible. A few other things of note. For CMAQ and CRP, the project cost minimum is $100,000, and that's the total cost, but it seems like you all have raised that, so that's good. I can't remember if Marta and her team mentioned this, but we typically like, the classic 80-20 split between federal and local match. But you can increase your local match share, but it needs to be in increments of 5 percentage points. So example of 25% in local match. And that reimbursement applies, that split applies through the life cycle of the project. You can use state funds for your local match, but it's only really under certain instances and criteria. The main things being that it has to be on the state highway system, and projects that are going after this strategy of funding. They can't be they can't be bike ped projects. They cannot be transit projects, and they can't occur on city or private streets. So a common example of what we see with this and other MPOs and rural areas as well is things like roundabouts, adding turn lanes, but this might not be as applicable to DCHC. And I'm pretty sure you all use the Moose model, but in case you need to do some emissions calculation work, you can use FHWA's emission calculator. You can go to this link below to access that, or you can just Google CMAQ FHWA toolkit, and it should be the first link that pops up. With that, I don't really have anything else. I know that was pretty quick, but I wanted to try and provide a good bit of information in a short amount of time. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to help out with that.
Thank you, Mark.
No questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay, well, I'm here. Here's my contact information. Feel free to email me or call me if anybody has anything they want to discuss regarding CMAQ or CRP.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Julie Bogle to present about procurement.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am your TPD, Transportation Planning Division Coordinator with MCDOT. And I'm just giving a high-level overview of federal funds with planning studies. How do you? Oh, just right. Okay.
The window is selected.
Thanks. So again, I am your coordinator. Please include me throughout the procurement process. So I will review like the draft scope, make sure it's eligible work, that it doesn't include more than 10% design, among other things. I will review your RFLOI, that is a request for letter of interest. So your draft before you advertise. Things like the criteria, evaluation criteria, the percents that they're in there, and that you selected discipline codes. Please also include me in the consultant selection process. Add me to your team. And the draft cost proposal and draft contract, I need to have those reviewed by our Office of Inspector General. So send those to me. And I will get it to them, and we need that before executing a contract. So your consultants like Marta and Raymond were seeing need to be pre-qualified with NCDOT. It's a quite a bit of process, but it needs to be done before work with NCDOT. And I will check on the pre-qualification status during the process. So also they do need to be in the CRS system, which is consultant rate system. So they need their rates and fees approved in the system, and it's best if it's done prior to them being selected for your study. So on-call contracts. So they're also called limited service agreements, and they should not exceed 5 years, including contract extensions. And there is no such thing as an MPO-wide on-call, so your jurisdiction cannot use the MPO's on-call or their lead planning agencies on-call. So you have to use your own on-call and your own procurement process. So with OIG review, Office of Inspector General review, prime and all subcontractor rates must be reviewed. And once it's reviewed, they send a review letter. And that review letter needs to be submitted back with your study's first invoice. So it gets linked into your project. The invoice, when you submit for reimbursement, is when it needs to be submitted so that it gets in our system and helps you with audits later. Let's see. So the DBEIS form is required, and it lists payments to consultants. So I have an example on the next slide. And it needs to be provided every quarter. It just shows who paid the consultant and how much that quarter. So we do need proof of payment. So here's different ways you can do it: canceled checks, bank statements, electronic fund transfers, and it is federally required. Again, the OIG letter needs to come back to us with your first invoice for your study. What else do I have for that one? Yeah, so this is very important. That's why we have it again. So please include it. So the last thing, in the UPWP, there's narratives for tasks, and the special studies that you're gonna be doing these, that are gonna be using these federal funds, your planning studies, they do need the name of the study and a short description of the study, and not just listing the different studies. So we need to know who is going to be doing the study, if it's going to be a consultant or MPO staff, and know a little bit about the study. So that's it. If there are any questions, but I did want to let you know, sorry, I need some water. That there is, well, let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, take your time.
No, there is so much more to procurement and invoicing, so we will have more information for you in the spring, hopefully.
Yes.
And please call us anytime during these processes, so we can help you through it. But if you have any questions now, me and Daryl's online too, I believe still, so we can answer any questions.
Any questions for Julie? Or Daryl? Hi, Daryl.
I just the overarching thing, TC members is just remember that don't just go out and hire a consultant blindly without letting us know. We have a full detailed training coming up, as you heard, next year, to really walk you through the steps, because we're just trying to be able to pay you, and it's federal funds. And so there's a lot of details. You know, heard from Marta's presentation. There's a lot of hoops to jump through. So we're just trying to get you there. And, you know, not only to pay you, but so that we don't take it back either from an audit. I don't want the money back. I just want you to have what to do for you, but you got to follow all these steps and procedures.
Thank you. All right. Very good.
Thank you so much, Julie. And with that, that concludes our training for today. Just a reminder, all materials will be sent out as well as posted on our website, as well as a recording of this meeting. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Al.